So I'm learning that people don't know how to watch reality TV. Premiering on June 11th, 2025, the 7th season of Love Island USA was always going to have a lot of eyes on it, especially after the massive success of Season 6 skyrocketed the US version of the show into a new stratosphere. Season 6 had your standard Love Island formula, but it also had like the perfect balance of romance, friendships, drama, and really it was like capturing lightning in a bottle. So Season 7 was always going to have big shoes to fill and more eyes on it than any previous season of Love Island USA. If by some miracle you haven't heard of the show, you're not familiar with it, and you don't know how it works, here's the gist. Young hot people wear swimming suits and date each other. That's it. There's a lot of drama, but it's rarely ever that deep, and it's always something that you can have fun watching and talking to your coworkers about. Reality TV has always had villains and heroes and people who shouldn't be on reality TV because they're normal and chill and you'd want to hang out with them in real life. And if you ever want to hang out with someone in real life, it usually means they're not good for reality television. There have always been fan favorites and the most hated, but since the advent of social media, these divides have become wider, the highs higher, and the lows basically setting up shop in hell. I started watching the 7th season when it came out, like when the first episode came out, and I wasn't trying to watch it through a critical lens. I was just really not trying to do anything other than watch something fun and stupid for the summer. This was the show for me to do nothing with, to turn my mind off and mindlessly consume, like when I get my hands on a bag of barbecue chips. Except as the episodes went on and the days passed and I saw not only what was happening on the show, but what was happening in the fandom's response to the show, the barbecue chips started to taste more like the death of nuance and critical thinking. So, of course, I just couldn't help myself. The trouble with Season 7 started before the first episode even came out, when the Islanders were first announced. For the uninformed, every season starts with a group of Islanders. These are the OGs. People can come and go through recouplings and basically dumpings. Sometimes a new Bombshell enters the villa, and the Bombshell's entire objective is just to be hot and step on toes and break people up. New people also have a chance to come in during Casa Amor, both a time and a place that's known as the ultimate relationship test. Casa is, of course, filled with more hot people, and the test is whether people sent there can stay loyal to the couple that they're in, or whether they're going to recouple with a new person that they meet. Sometimes a person comes back alone and the bond they had previously is strengthened, or they come back with someone from Casa and there's a recoupling, someone might get dumped. Yeah. And throughout all of this, there are numerous opportunities for audience members to vote for their favorite individual Islanders or their favorite couples, and whoever gets the least amount of votes usually risks getting dumped from the island, and you also risk getting dumped when you're left single and vulnerable. So normally we start out with 5 men and 5 women. The men introduced in S7 were Jeremiah, Ace, Taylor, Austin, and Nick. The women introduced were Shelly, Olandria, Bella, Huda, and Ulissa. Ace paired up with Ulissa, Huda with Jeremiah, Olandria with Taylor, Bella with Nick, and Shelly with Austin. As soon as the cast was announced, there was pushback from audiences who had found, within seconds, videos of Ulissa saying the N-word and the hateful social media posts liked and reposted by Austin. The season started as planned, but the problem persisted with fans calling for Ulissa's removal. Episode 2 started normally enough, with one line from the ever-charismatic Ian Sterling to explain Ulissa's absence.
Welcome back to Love Island USA. Ulissa has left the villa.
Let me tell you, I howled when I saw that because there was no explanation for why she was pulled from the show at all. And if you were a casual watcher who didn't use social media or engage with the fandom, you had no idea what was going on. I know because I was a casual watcher who didn't use social media or engage with the fandom, and I had no idea what was going on. When I went searching, I didn't just find the answer to Ulissa's exit, but I also found an audience who I initially found helpful in me trying to gauge the reception of the series. But the more time I spent looking at these think pieces and social media posts, I realized I also found an audience whose critical thinking skills were practically non-existent. This ended up being an incredibly frustrating season of Love Island USA, but an amazing season of trashy, messy, train wreck reality TV. The discourse I began to see was like getting insight into just where our society is and just how fucked media literacy has become. Season 7 has further revealed the puritanical values still dominating our culture. It showed how much people don't know how to watch reality TV and how little they know about editing, how cancel culture is more about likability than justice, and how the 2024 US election have people feeling especially passionate about a dating reality show. And lastly, it's demonstrated a hard-headed refusal to acknowledge the nuances of situations and people. I need a scientist or a psychologist to analyze this season and its fans, because what the fuck happened? High school was a miserable time for me, but there was one pocket of joy that I found in the Vince Gilligan created series Breaking Bad. Every Sunday night, when I should have been fatigued with the pre-Monday blues, I was captivated by Walter White. Walter was the first character I really connected to and empathized with that I watched go from understandable underdog to outright villain. I mean, I knew of movie characters that had villainous characteristics, but those were movies. It was different. It was over and done within 2 hours, give or take. Watching Walter White transform was on a different level because it happened over the course of 62 episodes, and for me, it happened slowly. I didn't watch Breaking Bad on streaming. I watched it on TV on Sunday night. So week by week, season by season, slowly realizing that my ability to empathize with this guy was waning. To experience that kind of characterization was a gift, and to my young mind, it changed the way I thought about storytelling. When Vince Gilligan set out to create Breaking Bad, he was fascinated by one very simple thing. He wanted audiences to watch a guy go from good to bad, from hero to villain. It goes without saying that he was very successful, but also there were many people who still to this day kind of miss the point that the villainy was the point. Like, I've met people who say they started to hate the show because they could no longer root for Walter, and baby, you don't have to keep rooting for him. Breaking Bad is one of the best television character studies I've ever seen, and there was nothing like watching it with audiences in real time as they slowly struggle to rationalize or justify Walter's actions. Some people to this day still try to condone Walter's actions, even though they've long since accepted that he was the villain of the story. But one thing people have really struggled with, year in and year out, is empathizing with the character who is arguably the moral compass of the series, Skyler. In the early days, Skyler was treated like shit by the fandom, and in the later days, Skyler was treated like shit by the fandom. People hated the character so much that the actress Anna Gunn ended up being on the receiving end of a lot of backlash for things that she obviously never did or said. At some point on the message boards, the character Skyler seemed to drop out of the conversation, and people transferred their negative feelings directly to me. The already harsh online comments became outright personal attacks. One such post read, "Could somebody tell me where I can find Anna Gunn so I can kill her?" Besides being frightened and taking steps to ensure my safety, I was also astonished. How had disliking a character spiraled into homicidal rage at the actress playing her? I know how wild it is to bring up Breaking Bad out of all things while talking about Love Island, but bear with me. I want to limit how much I talk about the Islanders themselves because my thoughts on this season are not really with them, not completely. My thoughts are on production and the fans who I think have been the real villains this entire time. I don't like piling on to people when they're already being highly scrutinized, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know these people or their motives or anything that happened in the villa better than they do. But in order to talk about the fans and their intense reactions to things, I have to talk about the Islanders to an extent and the things that happened on the show. But I'm going to be very careful, and I only want to talk about what happened on the show, what we saw, what the cast has said for themselves, and I don't want to assume more than that. Over halfway into the season, after Sierra Ortega started to become a popular Islander, despite what people are gonna try to say in their revisionist history of the season, screenshots were leaked of her using a racial slur against the Asian community, not once, but twice. The first post when she was a teenager, about 10 years before the start of the season. The second happened in 2024. Naturally and rightfully, people were calling for her to be removed from the island. It would not have been fair to remove Yulissa from the show for using slurs against Black people, but to let Sierra stay in the villa after using slur against Asian people. It would have very pointedly given viewers the warped message that racism against one ethnic group was worse than racism against a different ethnic group. Anti-Asian rhetoric is so prominent and so normalized, and when we don't talk about it or take accountability, we're letting that prejudice fester and embed itself further into the fabric of our society. Based on the precedent the production of Love Island had set, Sierra had to leave the villa. There was no question about it. Because the season was coming to an end, it started to feel like production was a little hesitant to remove Sierra. Removing Alyssa happened directly after episode 1. She didn't have a chance to be part of any major storylines, whereas Sierra, removing her toward the end of the season after she had been pushed as having major storylines, felt a bit trickier. In the end, though, after days of fans standing on their necks and all the legalities to take care of, Sierra was removed from the villa. I don't think anyone could or should defend Sierra, especially with having used those slurs, and especially with the context in which she used them. And I'm not defending Sierra against what she said. I want to make that abundantly clear. But there are other things that happened after her leaving the show and while she was on the show that, frankly, I kind of have to defend her for, because it got really fucking weird. You see, most people who were calling for Sierra to be removed were doing it because they were and are sincere advocates for anti-racism and wanted her to be held to the same standard as Alyssa, for her to be held accountable for what she said and to not be potentially rewarded by winning the game. But there are some people who I truly believe did not give a single fuck about racism or accountability or education or growth. Some people just did not like her, and they used the controversy to harp on about why she was irredeemably terrible. Writing about the incident for Slate magazine, Jenny G. Young said, "What we are left with in the wake of this latest controversy is sheer wreckage. Sierra faces a much more potentially harmful environment than she would have had Love Island USA simply kicked her off when producers first caught wind of the racial slur usage. Some viewers who now feel bad about Sierra's fate are once again insisting that the deployment of isn't that offensive and not worth making this much of a fuss over. Objectively, the wrong lesson to take from this. Others will have a different takeaway that isn't much better. That fandom is combat, and any amount of dogpiling, digging up secrets, and sending death threats is fair game in the trenches." When Sierra left, a lot of watchers started to joke that a curse had been lifted from the villa and that the vibes were so much better. Now, to be fair, this season has been notably light on all the things that make a season of Love Island particularly cute and fun. There was a higher focus on drama and pointless challenges, and because there were so few couples to root for, everything felt a bit middling and a bit dark, and Casa was just the worst. Every season of Love Island, no matter if it has a decent balance of drama and levity, always gets really easygoing during the last week, because the last week is an opportunity for all couples to convince viewers that they're the best couple out of all the other best couples, and it's the opportunity for production to show favorable clips of the couple they think should win. It's essentially a campaign. The whole week is a campaign to get votes prior to the finale. Since they're trying to put the focus on love, producers naturally ease up on the drama edits during this time and focus on monotony, but like warm monotony. It can be a little boring and a little slow, but these episodes are usually like a nice relief, especially if there was a lot of tension during the season up until this point. Sierra's exit coincided with the first proper ladies' choice recoupling that season had, one with speeches, which we'd been missing like all season. The last episode we saw her in also saw the departure of 5 other Islanders, and the first episode she doesn't appear in ended with 2 other Islanders going home as well, and she was pulled out just before the final week. So we're in the notoriously lighthearted moment of the season. 7 people have left. Everyone remaining is already in a couple, and producers are focusing heavily on couple dynamics. A lot of things changing at the same time that would change the energy of the episodes. But because Sierra left at the same time, everyone suddenly feels comfortable saying it feels better because she was gone and she was casting a dark shadow over the villa.
Yeah, well, with Sierra, I definitely cried because it was like, you guys don't get to see the friendships that we build in there. Like, you know, they're focused on the romantic relationships of it all, but that was like really a friend of ours. So to know that one second we're all chilling and stuff, and the next second, like, oh guys, so she has to leave the island. We're like, what?
Yeah.
And even that morning we were talking about like how grateful we are that we're here together and like, you know, time is almost up. And I was like, girl, don't even say that. Like, we're not there yet.
It all started as a joke, but there were people who took it 100% seriously. And this bothered me, but I couldn't figure out why. After all, I'm not sitting here feeling like I need to defend someone's racism, so what was the big deal? It took a few days, but then it came to me. This just felt like another example of the general discomfort people seem to have with Nuance. With Walter White, viewers had trouble sitting with the fact that they had been encouraging this character whose actions were becoming increasingly indefensible because the idea that he had become what he became was too uncomfortable. Sierra did an awful thing, using an incredibly ugly word that has been used to perpetuate harmful stereotypes and to basically dehumanize an entire ethnic group. But before these screenshots were leaked and before the episodes that turned her into a mean girl, Ciara had been widely liked. She had one moment where people called her, Shelley, and Olandria mean girls, but prior to that, the most they could say about her was that she seemed too neutral, too well-spoken, and often played the cool girl. And I don't know if cool girl is like worthy of this level of hate, because I just thought maybe it'd be like a slightly annoying thing, but the way people are reacting... During her time on the show, a lot of people liked her, and she had almost reached 1 million followers on Instagram before the controversy really spread. I'm not going on about how she was well-liked to make you feel bad for her or anything like that. I'm telling you this because it is now a historical fact. What people were doing when they decided to paint her out as being the real villain of the villa when the gag became serious was essentially playing into a revisionist history where Ciara was very obviously the only problem all along. The reason this bothered me, seeing everyone pretend that she had always had this really dark energy and was oppressing the villa, was because in a way it distorted her racism. Let me explain. Accepting these two truths simultaneously, one, that she was likable on the show, and two, that she casually and carelessly used racial epithets, was a lot harder to hold in tandem. It would be easier if the whole time she was this malicious supervillain twirling her mustache and making everyone in the villa miserable, because the truth was too nuanced to be easily accepted. It couldn't be that someone who was likable and, according to her socials, quite progressive could still hold such ugly words and prejudices in her heart. She had to have been this big monster from the beginning, but all this does is perpetuate the myth that racism can only be perpetrated by people who are obviously evil, cartoonishly evil, and that you can see their bad guyness from a mile away. It bothered me because it ignored the normalization and the ubiquity of racism. Racism that is so widespread and is so instrumental to the foundations of America that anyone can hold these ideas and perpetuate them, even in if they're not intending to. And I'm not saying that was the case with her, but that can happen. It shuts down any opportunity to discuss racism within progressive or pseudo-progressive circles, and it ignores the history and pervasiveness of racial bias, even among people of color. Ciara is of Mexican and Puerto Rican heritage. There's an opportunity here to interrogate what racist language is normalized among people of color and why. And when we dismiss those conversations by simply writing her off as always having been an evil force, we're not having the conversations that we should be having or could be having. And that sucks. It just sucks. It also reaffirmed that although many people wanted her to be held accountable, and rightfully so, there were also a lot of people who really didn't care about racism and were only using it as a vehicle to throw stones at someone they already didn't like. It highlights the hypocrisy of not only the viewers, but even some of the Islanders who, despite learning that Austin, a fellow contestant, had a history of sharing racist ideologies on his socials, felt okay hanging out with him and posting about it. At the same time that they distanced themselves from Ciara, they shared photos and videos of being reunited with Austin. Austin, along with Yulissa, incurred scrutiny before the season even started for the casual racism that could be found on their socials. But Austin stayed in the villa and only left after a standard elimination round. And fans justify this by saying the racism that Austin displayed and that Ciara displayed were very different. And that's true, they are very different. Ciara used a slur herself, whereas Austin was reposting hateful ideas that supported harsh immigration laws. One of them used racist language and one of them supported institutions of racism. And that brings up another conversation about which forms of racism are tolerated and which ones aren't. And it's a conversation that can't be had because it keeps being dismissed. But also, if this was all about racism, then maybe what happened with Shelley and Olandria would be very different. During her brief time on the show, contestant Beldasha made it very clear that she was looking for a good Christian man who would treat her right. She also set firm boundaries. She would not be doing any kissing on the first dates, and out of respect, whenever there was a kissing challenge, people kissed her on the cheek instead. Beldasha quickly expressed interest in Nick and coupled up with him, which lasted all of 2 seconds because when Bombshell, Ciara, and Charlie entered the villa, Ciara went for Nick immediately. The show consists of these odd challenges that have nothing to do with the contestants at all. Like, in a normal challenge, someone could win something. On the traders, doing well in a challenge adds money to the prize pot, which one lucky winner or winners can take home at the end of the game. Some contestants can even win immunity so they can't be killed off in the middle of the night. And Claim to Fame, a show where people have to guess what celebrity their fellow contestants are related to, winning a challenge could earn you a detailed clue that you can then use to solve someone's identity. On Love Island, the challenges are just there, and we all kind of accept it, but this isn't the norm. Like, usually someone might win like a night in the hideaway or a date. So this season was just weird. It was just weird. It's a weird season. One of Love Island's most controversial and insulting challenges is one where guys and the girls take turns ranking the islanders from who they think has the lowest body count to the highest. When this game was played in Season 7, Beldasha was revealed to have the lowest and Sierra was revealed to have the highest.
Aww, can't get no coochie out this period.
I'm a grown woman. I'm not ashamed of my experiences. And I think anyone who wants to judge me for it should get laid.
Upon entering the villa, Bombshells had the opportunity to have a sleepover with an islander they fancied in the hideaway. Sierra chose Nick and they made out. I know all of this sounds like fluff, but these are the little things that viewers would later use to start shaming the women on the show who were sexual. Sierra was quickly accused of using her body, and people compared her negatively to Beldasha, suggesting that Bella was more of a high-value woman because she wasn't as physical. Reactions like these would go on and on throughout the season. Each time an islander had sex, they would catch flack from viewers. Well, not they exactly, because it was always the women. Huda was called easy for having sex with Jeremiah. Sierra was called calculated for having sex with Nick. Hannah was called a number of names. Honestly, there are too many to count. Viewers exalted Beldasha for having been a so-called example of piety and purity. For people who started to dislike Sierra before her use of slurs resurfaced, they hold the things they didn't like about her to begin with on the same level as the racism, which is not only stupid but wildly disrespectful to the real issue at hand. No, it's not just as bad that someone who used a racial slur also had sex with her consenting partner. What the fuck are you talking about? And if everyone was only doing this because racism should never be tolerated, we wouldn't be having people threatening to call ICE on this girl's family and leaving comments on her socials, sending her messages, telling her to kill herself. This controversy made people who didn't like Sierra feel vindicated. They were clutching at straws before. They didn't like her because she had sex. They didn't like her because she was quote-unquote media trained. That accusation is easily the silliest, because how are you going to hate someone this much just for knowing how to talk to people? They didn't like her because of a bad moment she shared with 2 other girls during an explosive challenge, but now they had a good reason and they could stand on that reason while bringing up their non-issues and claiming they're doing so in the name of racial justice. Now we come to one of the other big issues plaguing this season of the show. To be clear, this thing casts a shadow over every season of the show. In fact, it casts a shadow over everything, show or not. Yes, I'm talking about her, the one, the only. Misogyny. Now, I don't have stats to back this up, I will openly admit that, so what I'm about to say is based on what I see in the fandom. It seems that most of the people who watch Love Island USA are women. A lot of the discourse I saw online was coming from women, meaning a lot of this misogyny we've been seeing is the projection of an internalized bias. A bias that's hard to shake. The misogyny of this season has been quite rampant, and it's mostly gone unquestioned. I started the video with Sierra because the very reasonable and necessary call for her to be removed from the villa started with her use of racial slurs, but there were a lot of people who hopped onto this in order to shame her for other things that had nothing to do with racism. Her appearance was made fun of, her sexuality derided, and this has been a constant trend in audience reception. When Hannah's first partner, Charlie, was excommunicated from the village, eliminated from the villa, she pretty quickly moved on to Pepe. She was understandably upset about it at first and cried it out, but she went on to make the most of her Love Island experience and explored the new connection with Pepe. When she felt comfortable, the two of them had sex, and you would not believe how much the fandom started to hate her for this. They called her fake for crying over Charlie, and deemed her a slut for moving on with Pepe. No matter how you feel about Huda, we can all agree that she has done a lot of things worthy of criticism. But having sex with consenting partners should not have been one of them. Once she had sex with Jeremiah, she was shamed for putting out too soon, and then when she and Jeremiah were separated, she was made fun of and called stupid because, quote, having sex with him didn't work. whatever that means. This would also come into play in the stan discourse. A really popular couple is Nick and Alandria, who became finalists. After Sierra was removed from the villa, Nick and Alandria coupled up, and this came after a long time of fans wishing they'd get together, so the reception was really positive. Now, some of these shippers are normal, and some of them are not. There are some who felt the need to denigrate Sierra in order to uplift their favorite couple, and they would say things like, Alandria and Nick are more real than Sierra and Nick because Alandria didn't have to put out to get coupled up. And comments like these don't even scratch the surface. This is only the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, we could say that purity culture is making a comeback, but I would argue that it actually never left and has been present in everything, even in the midst of our many sex-positive revolutions. When I see this puritanism and the fandom's naughty habit of trying to find ways to punish women for not meeting their moral standards, whether it's shaming Hannah for being sexual or deciding a woman is a stonewalling bully for being upset with a friend and taking the time to regulate her emotions, I have to wonder if some of these fans are just in the wrong time period. You little puritanical heathens would have loved burning bitches at the stake. You're watching the wrong show. Salem Witch Trials airs between 1692 and 1693. So the audience has demonstrated so far that they have trouble looking at a season in its entirety. Episodes come out every day but Wednesday, technically every day but Wednesday and Saturday, because not a lot of people watch After Sun, if we're being honest. And you would think that such a condensed format would have people being more patient. After all, you can't make snap judgments about someone when it's happening day to day, and the thing that you're mad about, by the next episode, it could be over and done with. Beef that was squashed, right? You would think people would be more patient. Of course they weren't. Viewers make these really harsh judgments on the Islanders based on things that happen, like just one incident, without ever waiting for conflicts to be resolved or conversations to be had before they start creating their villain edits and insisting that Islanders should be cast off into the sea. In the 24th episode of the 7th season, the Islanders participated in another challenge. This one is called the Hearts on Fire Challenge. This one is really just an oversexed humiliation ritual that oozes the antithesis of eroticism. Typically, the gist of this challenge is the Islanders dance up on one another, and they're all wearing these heart monitors. Maybe you do a little bit of striptease, and you try to get people's hearts racing. The idea being that whoever raised someone's heart the most was the person they were most turned on by. And while scientifically we know that people's hearts race for more than just arousal, for the show, you once again just go with it. It doesn't matter. During this challenge, Huda paid special attention to Ace, who by this point was coupled up with Shelly. Suffice it to say, they did a lot more than what the standard challenge would call for. I'm not just saying that. Many other Islanders, including Huda herself, have said they did a lot, and Shelly was upset by it, naturally. But contrary to popular belief, it wasn't really or just because her partner was being danced up on. It was specifically because Huda had made it clear to the girls from day one how much she appreciated it when they didn't go too far with her then partner Jeremiah in challenges. Shelly was especially respectful of this and never even kissed Jeremiah, challenge or not. More than anything, Shelly was disappointed by the hypocrisy of the situation. Later in the Stand on Business challenge, Shelly, who was already pretty upset about the Hearts on Fire debacle, publicly questioned Huda on her values.
To Huda from Shelly. If you're going to preach about being a girl's girl, you should practice what you preach. To want loyalty and respect from your friends, but not give it is crazy. You say how your intentions are in the best interest of your friends, but they're actually selfish, and I wish you'd stand on it.
Okay, to explain this more, I need to go back to when the girls went to Casa. Just hold on, I'm so sorry. I'm new to this, not true to this. Chris, a Casa boy, expressed interest in Shelly and initially coupled up with her for the experience, but he recoupled with Huda upon entering the villa. While in Casa, Huda was coupled up with a guy named JD and didn't seem to express interest in Chris until just before the recoupling. But again, these shows are edited. We don't know when the first time was mentioned or what conversations are being had. We only see what we are shown. I'm just painting out a picture for you to understand the backlash. Now, I'm really sorry to be throwing all of this information at you, especially if you're not familiar with the show and you don't even care about it, because these are a lot of names, a lot of information, and I know it's all very confusing, but just hang in there, okay? Back to the Stand on Business Challenge. Shelly gives Huda a message about not practicing what she preaches, and then other girls like Olandria and Sierra throw in their commentary about the situation. Apparently, all the girls had questions for Huda regarding lies she was allegedly telling, but they specifically bring up Huda bringing Chris back to the villa. This is important because what ended up happening was that all three of these girls, Shelly especially, became the villains of the week for this moment. Fans were confused as to why Chris was even an issue when Shelly ended up going back to her couple with Ace anyway, and they accused the girls of bullying Huda, of using the girls girl phrase and philosophy to police how Huda operated in the villa, which, well, okay, if we're being real, the girls girl phrase has always been weaponized in this way. Most of these takes were being willfully ignorant. The reason these women kept bringing up so-called girls girl behavior was because, well, if you go back to previous episodes, it's not exactly rare for Huda to use the girls girl thing as an insult or a measure of camaraderie. This context is important because the only reason Shelly mentions Huda being a girls girl or not is because of the precedent that Huda had set. But by the time this episode rolled around, everyone, okay, not everyone, but a lot of fucking people, too many fucking people, completely forgot this context. It was this moment that made everyone turn on Shelly, Olandria, and Sierra. This challenge and the way it was edited, and more importantly, the way viewers watched it, changed everything overnight. Sierra, who had been one of the most popular girls, started to lose followers, and attention on her use of the slur gained traction. Shelly and Olandria also start losing followers, but something really weird happens here too. People have their pitchforks out, they start making these TikTok think pieces, and way too many people are leaving racial slurs in the comments of these girls' profiles. They're called mean girls, conniving, calculated, aggressive. In this same challenge, Olandria, for the first time on the show, expressed her pain and anger at Taylor, who ditched her for Clark during Casa. For many episodes, she was holding back this anger, but in this moment it came out, and instantly, she was called scary and intimidating. The entire season, both Shelly and Olandria were level-headed and calm and were consistently the voices of reason. They both became fan favorites, and even though some people didn't know how to feel about Shelly's coupling with Ace, she was still largely liked. Neither one of them really got into arguments or started anything. Even when the guys they were coupled up with were moving in ways they didn't like or understand, they tried to be patient and forgiving. The irony is that just before this, watchers were calling them boring because they didn't express emotion. And yet, the moment they let themselves express their anger, they were immediately called everything but children of God. It was one thing to criticize them for not handling the situation well, if that was your perspective, but it was something else entirely to have people foaming at the mouth and insisting they needed to get humbled. Their socials were filled with such inflammatory and vicious comments that both of their handlers had to release statements pleading with people to stop. Even brands and major corporations gleefully jumped in, excited for the opportunity to punch down on an islander whose biggest crime was telling a friend that she was angry with her. Oh wait, no, I forgot. Shelly also bullied Huda and stonewalled her by saying she was too upset to talk and they should do it the next day. How could I forget? Such villain behavior. Overnight Oats made a post about sending products to the villa, and someone commented, "Send some to Shelly." Whoever was running that account replied, "We'd never do that to Huda." BuzzFeed, which I'm frankly surprised is still a thing, decided to join in by making collages of what breakfasts they would prepare for the islanders. The breakfasts were all kind of jokey, like they indicated they'd give Huda a steak because early on in the season, Huda's first partner, Jeremiah, brought her breakfast and the first thing she said was, "What, no protein?" Pretty funny. On Shelly's side, they said they'd make her a fruit bowl, some goldfish for Ace, which is already pretty insulting and infantilizing, but the most baffling and offensive inclusion was a fist placed between two slices of bread representing a knuckle sandwich. We have officially lost the plot. All of this vitriol, and by the episode after the Stand on Business challenge, not even halfway through, everyone had made amends. Masses of people have held on to the vitriol, gripping on like their lives depend on it.
It's Olandria and Shelly!
You'd be right in thinking that this sounds like it has more to do with a lack of nuance, but this is also indicative of a larger issue when it comes to media literacy. As I mentioned before, a lot of the viewers aren't judging it as a full season, they're watching from episode to episode, and more importantly and more damningly, they're not paying attention to the fucking editing. Never in my life did I think I would be making a video not even critiquing a reality show, but critiquing audiences who don't know how to watch reality shows. But, you know, there's a first time for everything. I've been doing this for like 6 years, so I guess it's high time. I don't know. And you might be under the impression that like watching a reality TV show or not knowing how to watch it is a non-issue because it's not philosophy, it's not rocket science, but there's a right way to watch it. And unfortunately, a lot of the audience watching I can't even fucking speak. A lot of the audience watching the 7th season of Love Island, they have no idea what that right way is, and it's been driving me crazy. The thing that stuck out to me the most when I was like creeping around the internet and seeing what people were saying was that people just didn't know what they were watching and they didn't know how to make sense of it. And I don't mean to suggest that reality TV is this deep, complex, profound thing that only the biggest of brains can comprehend. I just mean that watching reality TV or even a documentary is different from watching a fictional TV show or film. Most of the time, when you're watching a standard movie or television series, you can find the good guys and the bad guys and the archetypes they operate within. When the camera cuts from a shot of a protagonist looking sad and then to a shot of the rain coming down, we can safely assume a lot of things. Depending on the context, the protagonist could be sad because of the rain, or the rain could be a visual representation of their sadness. Or it could just be a new scene entirely. It's safe to make a connection between the two or to find motifs of rain that come up in the story, but you cannot loosely apply the laws of fiction to real people, and you can't use the traditional rules of editing a fictional film for the rules of editing a reality show. Both forms are designed to tell you a story, but only one of them is manipulating your perspective to the detriment of real people. In editing, there's something known as the Kuleshov effect. And I'm sure you've heard of it, but if you haven't, I'm gonna just explain it real quick. The Kuleshov effect is essentially how vastly different interpretations can be made depending on the juxtaposition between different shots. If I turn the camera on myself, making a blank face, blanker than that, and then I turned it to like, I don't know, a donut, then you would probably assume that I really want that donut, or like I'm trying really hard not to have another donut, you know? You could like infer things from that. A lot of people who aren't familiar with the mechanics of visual storytelling aren't aware of how much their opinion can change depending on how these shots are used and what order they are in. When you're watching a movie, there's nothing wrong with like assuming you have the whole picture of what the scene is conveying or trying to convey. When you're watching reality TV, you can never assume that you have the whole picture or that you know the entire situation. What I'm saying basically is that the best way, the only way to watch reality TV is to know that it's not all reality. It's highly manipulated, and what you're seeing is the result of what the production wants you to see from the show, the storylines they want you to engage with. And you also have to keep in mind that even if it is a reality show that's really manipulated or even scripted, because some of them are, you still are watching real people, so you can't treat them like characters. Some reality TV is highly scripted because, let's be honest, if you go to a celebrity's house to follow them around, the chances that you're going to get a complete story are very slim to none. So you kind of have to push it in the right direction and create an arc rather than risk not having a story at all. If you watch reality TV without any discernment and just accept everything you're being shown as the truth, the unequivocal truth, you're doing a bad media literacy. Stop it. The creators of a reality television show capture hundreds of hours of footage. All of that has to be cut down to an hour or less for any given episode, meaning there's a lot you're not seeing. I'm sorry to be an asshole, but this shouldn't have to be explained. This is like when you watch Jurassic Park, you know they didn't go back in time and hire real dinosaurs for the role, right? You should know that there's a magic trick happening, and reality TV works best when everyone is in on it. You can't assume two people have never spoken just because you haven't seen it, and you can't assume conversations you weren't shown were never had. And I haven't even talked about andreina. Andreina was a bombshell who came in on episode 15. No one had any strong feelings about Andreina upon her entering the villa other than, well, it's an objectively insane choice to send bombshells into Casa Single. Why they, because TJ was there too, why they didn't have a chance to recouple before that, I'll never understand. People started to turn on Andreina as well shortly after the Hearts on Fire challenge, because she sat and listened to how Huda felt about the challenge, told her to talk to Shelly, and then told Shelly that Huda didn't understand why she was upset. By the way, people also said that Shelly was a mean girl for not talking to Huda, but airing it out with her friends to try to see if she was tripping about the situation. And I just want to say, if that's mean girl behavior, then bitch, I'm Regina George. Shortly after this, Huda was upset about something, and the episode cut to a moment of Andreina saying Huda was slamming drawers for 5 minutes, and immediately everyone was claiming she was a lying backstabber because they didn't see Huda closing the doors. It was shocking how many times I saw comments during my lurking that were some variation of, for example, person A would claim that XYZ happened, or that ABC didn't happen, and that comment would have a lot of likes or upvotes depending on the platform, and then person B would say that, well, we don't know, it didn't happen, I assume that came from a different conversation that wasn't included. And person A would reply and say, I guess there could be more footage, but I doubt it. Could be. Guys! The reality in reality TV isn't intended to describe the factual nature of the show. It's intended to describe the people involved. These aren't characters, these aren't actors, these are sometimes average Joes or maybe influencers looking for a boost to their social status, or even celebrity families. These are just average humans most of the time, not playing a role. Yeah, they might ham it up for the cameras, but at the end of the day, these are real people with real messy, sometimes illogical emotions, and that's what viewers seem to forget when they watch the show. Or any reality show for that matter. It's not just that they take the nuance out of difficult conversations or situations, they take the nuance out of humanity and reduce the people they're watching to their worst moments. The way audiences watched Love Island in 2025, the way they engaged with voting and demanded that Islanders reflect their own moralities, made me think of the general air of discontent and disillusionment affecting a lot of the populace right now. A lot of the frustration directed at the Islanders reminds me of the frustration American citizens have had with the current administration. Every time there was a vote, fans would bring up the 2024 election, mostly as a joke, but there was also palpable frustration there. They strategically voted to get people out of the villa with the same passion as if they were getting the chance to make sweeping changes in the government. They were invested and passionate, and they organized with careful deliberation. In a way, the villa became a way for audiences to exact revenge after feeling frustrated with the current state of the world. They could decide someone was being a tyrant in the villa and make moves to get them off the show. And if they couldn't get them off the show, at the very least, they could share why they saw this person as a tyrant and then psychoanalyze every move they made. Everyone, people inside the villa included, became experts in psychology. Jeremiah was love bombing, Shelly was stonewalling, Ace was a narcissist, and at some point or another, everyone was gaslighting and I could not keep up. It's very hard to believe that racial inequity isn't being weaponized to cyberbully someone, when some of the fans are decrying racism while also engaging in racist behavior. This is what I meant when I said there are different forms of racism, not just in Sierra's slur usage or in Austin's repost, but in how the fandom responds or doesn't respond to their own implicit biases. For about 90% of the show, Shelly, Alandria, and Sierra were so calm and good at handling disagreements that a few pockets of the internet started to accuse them of being disingenuous. Sierra in particular was dragged for giving so-called PR answers. Shelly and Alandria, two dark-skinned black women, have had to be hyper-aware of their behavior and how they come across, and I can imagine this ramping up during the show where they knew their every move was being watched and every micro-expression deconstructed in think pieces. Many black women who watch shows like Love Island sometimes want for black women to stop going on these shows because it's hard to watch them either being dismissed by their fellow contestants or villainized by the audience watching. Destiny of Season 5, an Islander who moved slowly but never took any shit from anyone, was constantly harassed and clowned for behaviors that would later go uncriticized when perpetrated by someone of a much lighter skin tone, which we saw a repeat of with season 7. Even with me trying to be careful about how I speak on the Islanders, it's hard not to talk about how Huda behaved throughout the season, especially in the first half. If a black woman did a fraction of that, people would have been organizing to make sure she had no votes and would be sent home.
No, you're a fucking bitch!
Or if they couldn't vote, they would start making fake screenshots to get her pulled out for hate speech, like what fans were trying to do to Alandria when they generated fake messages of her using the F slur. In a post-Villa interview, Alandria was asked how she felt navigating the Love Island reception and the many microaggressions it holds as a black woman. It's very tough and unfortunate as a black woman. We feel like we can't truly speak our minds and express our feelings without being perceived as something different. I was everyone's go-to person, which is why you saw those tears when I was dumped from Casa. They were saying, she's the glue to this family. She always makes sure I feel seen, or she always validates my feelings. But I was not portrayed as that. I was portrayed as a mean girl. It is quite interesting that these 3 girls who were so calm and collected that people had accused one of them of being PR trained had one moment where they expressed their honest feelings and were immediately dubbed mean girls. When we watched the episode, there was one other Islander who seems to agree with Shelley's point about Huda, and this person was never framed as being a mean girl. Iris. Chill, Iris, who knows it's important to befriend crows. I'm not saying this, by the way, to suggest that she should also be called a mean girl, because I don't think anyone was mean in this scenario. Bringing up Chris certainly didn't help their argument, but that didn't mean what they were doing was bullying. And I don't know, I just think if we're ignoring the obvious bias the fandom has displayed by calling 4 women of color bullies for having very human responses to things, then we're lying to ourselves when we act as if the fandom as a whole are being sincere advocates of anti-racism. And while we're on the topic, let's not act like the Love Island producers haven't played a hand in this. It's particularly damning when we look at some of the edits Clark got early on. Clark came in during Casa and initially coupled up with Nick, but really had a spark with Taylor. Taylor had been in a couple with Alandria from the beginning, but he never told Alandria that he wasn't attracted to her. It was something everyone watching knew because he had said so to Ace, but it was something Alandria didn't know, and it was painful to watch. When Clark came in, he lost all interest in Alandria and in pretending to like her. The show was edited to make it look as if Clark was constantly making faces at Alandria behind her back, or side-eyeing Alandria and Taylor whenever they talked. What we know of reaction shots is that they can be taken from any moment and spliced into the edit to create a narrative. Unless you see someone reacting a certain way in an unedited wide shot, there is reasonable doubt that their reaction was actually a response to whatever else is being shown. In one episode, for example, Clark stares at Alandria and Taylor talking, but her bathing suit changes from a brown one-piece to a black bikini. This is all normal reality show stuff, but it was held onto and used to make cases against Islanders for the most minor offenses. And when audiences had a chance to rank the Islanders from most to least genuine, they ranked Clark at the very bottom. They called her snaky and deceitful and petty. By the way, Clark never actually did or said anything that was suspect. The worst thing about her had nothing to do with what she did and everything to do with what Taylor did. And yet, that was enough. Clark and Alandria were also spoken of in such degrading ways. They were both masculinized, called men in drag, or likened to animals. And this coming from audience members who swear they're passionate about racial justice.
Okay.
Writer Anna Babb penned an essay on her Substack titled, "A lot of y'all aren't woke, just assholes." It's about Love Island, cancel culture, and the spectacle of selective accountability. I'm going to link it down below. I think it's really well written. I think it perfectly encapsulates everything that went wrong with this season, and I'd like to quote a section here. "This isn't a call to trivialize the impact of offensive words, but we need some nuance. What we're seeing is the result of allowing bad actors to turn the public utilization of social justice into a purity test. Publicly stoning someone who unknowingly uses harmful language with the same intensity as someone running a Twitter account appears disingenuous at worst and ineffective at best. Disingenuous because it treats unintentional acts of ignorance as an opportunity to crucify instead of one to educate. Ineffective because it obfuscates the line between a misstep born from ignorance and one from overt hate. Social progressivism then becomes an immutable trait of the haves and the have-nots, instead of a constant journey of unlearning harmful cultural dogma. And finally, the thing that's made this season and, the response to it so insufferable is simply that, when a fandom gets bigger, things just start to suck a little more. We sometimes make fun of people who get a little sad or upset when something they like gets really popular, and we accuse them of gatekeeping or hipsterism. But I think, they have good reason to be upset, because historically when fandoms get bigger, it does start to get a little more toxic. And it's been odd all around. I know that parasocial word gets thrown around often, but it's really weird to see people digging up old social media posts to find dirt on islanders they don't like. I mean, some people were even generating their own fake screenshots to add fuel to the fire, to villainizing people they didn't know for behaving in a way they didn't like on a manipulated show in a contained environment. And it's not to say that behaviors like these haven't been going on, for years since reality TV was born, but the level of it has been so intense for season 7 that you can't help but take notice. I know I've already said it, but people have simply lost the plot. And all I can say is that if you watch this show and you think you know the Islanders, and you think you know them well enough to psychoanalyze them and tell them what's best for them, and that you know what their experiences in the villa were better than they know themselves, then honey, you need to stop worrying about shipping. You need to stop worrying about romantic connections involving people that you will most likely never meet, because you desperately need to couple up with therapy. You're all extremely odd individuals.
Walk up in the spot, they be like, whoa.